5, APUS History, Lesson 12, the Jeffersonian Age, or the Age of Jefferson. In Lesson 11, we had talked about this so-called revolution. We'd ended our final lesson with the notion of something you learned about in your history classes as well, this peaceful transfer of power from one political party, the Federalists, to a new emergent political party, the Democratic Republicans. And when we're talking about Republicans, the term gets used an awful lot in history class. Sometimes with a capital R, sometimes lowercase. It can mean any number of things. And it's important for you to understand in your sequence, the Democratic Republican Party we're talking about now has no connection at all whatsoever with today's Democrats and Republicans. One question I always get from my students is, so is this where today's Democrats and Republicans come from? This group split up? And the answer is no. What the issues here are so alien in the context, it's so alien to the modern era that you can't apply them. It's simply by coincidence that these people have the same names for their parties, but it's not, there's no link yet, not yet in the political history at this point in time. So I do want to start by revisiting the idea in the clearest possible terms I can of what small r republicanism is. Republicanism not as a political party of identification, but as an adjective or as an ideology. It is a way of a political body of collected ideas that aren't tied to a party, but are tied more to a philosophical worldview. And your first slide gets into that. As in republicanism with a lowercase r, there's a reason why that r is not capitalized. It's an ideology, a collected set of political beliefs. And what are the key components of it? The virtuous nation filled with virtuous citizens would be citizens that embody all of these characteristics and categories of selflessness, sacrifice, equality, living honestly and plainly, a life of morality, doing the right thing, a life of sobriety, a life of balance, and placing the collective public good over my own self-interest, and then the notion of merit, an aristocracy of talent, if you will, versus an aristocracy of having a lot of money, an aristocracy of having the right last name, or an aristocracy of being from an elite class of people. So that's small r republicanism. On to democratic republicanism, or Jeffersonian republicanism. As you can see on your slide, you're referencing some things that should have been extremely important in the history classes that you covered. You cannot talk about this period of history and not engage with these ideas. And more importantly for you, the all-suffering student, if you're called upon to write on this time period in history, it's not just about a regurgitation of facts. This is a time of history when you're talking about big political ideas, ideas about the way that these people thought the world ought to work. And the facts are some of the things that color in around that. And so as such, the Jeffersonian positions, as we revisiting them again, are very important. The people now in office, they were pro-yeoman farmer. They believed that wealth was something to be distrusted because dynastic wealth, they thought, was the enemy of small d democracy. They felt that banking at the state level was important. There was no role for a federal bank. National debt was not desirable, a balanced budget, because debt is going to create a government that's going to spend more as more debt gets paid and increase its powers with that spending. A national school system was good because they had faith in the people. Through education, individuals could rise and become part of this aristocracy of talent, this aristocracy of merit, over inheritance, wealth, and status. They wanted Western lands for the purpose of giving them to the yeoman farmer, which will get us into Louisiana Purchase here shortly. And they felt that the French might not be going about things the right way with the Reign of Terror, but their intentions, their hearts were in the right place with wanting to be a kindred republic, a fellow republic, and not have absolutist rule. And their most famous quote, the very final bullet, the government that governs the best governs the least. It's a real touchstone of their way of thinking, and it's a way of thinking you will not see die throughout the American experience. You're going to see quite a few groups come up in the future, and even in your current present day, that want this notion of a limited government, saying that large government is playing too much of a role in people's lives. Some of these ideas, not in a direct causal sense, but in their ideological background, can be traced back to some of this thinking in this period here. As for the Federalists, the party that was excused from power in 1800, as you recall, they were the party of industry and commerce. Hamilton thought the United States someday was going to aspire to be this vast industrial colossus, but right now was in its infant stages. They were more representing the producing classes, the urban classes, the industrial, not the industrial, but the producing Northeast, if you will, the commercial Northeast. They were going to tax the farmer for revenue, tax the tariffs in order to both gain revenue and protect these industries. And they said the common man's sort of an idiot. The common man is basically ruled by his passions. And their best evidence, they said, was look at France. They said, you want rule by the common man? Look at the Reign of Terror. That's rule by the common man. And when they referenced the term mob rule, that's what they meant. They believed in rule by the better sort of people. Hamilton's most famous quote on this was he thought the country was destined to be ruled by the rich, the well-born, and the able. That was going to be the aristocracy of talent that should run the country. And they wanted the western lands only for resources, because if you made them into new states, people are going to populate those states that won't leave enough people to work in the businesses and trades of the emerging Northeast. And they did believe the elastic clause was very important, because governments should extend and expand to meet new challenges as necessary for the good of the nation, expanding their powers as is necessary and proper. So this group is now leaving the White House, and when Jefferson walks in as president, he has a series of actions and non-actions that he has to take. Specifically, he has to come in, and since this has never happened before, there hasn't until this point in history been a democratic republic that went through this peaceful transfer of power. Usually in the human experience, history had shown us that whoever had gotten power hung on to it until it was pried from their cold, dead fingers. Because once you had power, you kept it. The only way you lost it, you never gave it up. It was taken from you. It was stripped from you, or you kept on having it. So there's some real questions in America as what this means. Does the rise of the Democratic Republicans mean that we're going to have mob rule? Does it mean that we're going to have our own version of a reign of terror? Does it mean the Federalists are going to be liquidated because of their beliefs? And the first thing that Jefferson has to do, he has to come in smooth, ruffled feathers. Okay, he's got to assure the nation that we're not going to go into a tyranny of liberty any more than we might have been a tyranny of absolutism under the Federalist laws. And the most famous quote from his inaugural address that exemplifies this is when he says, "We are all Republicans, we are all Federalists." And what he means by that is that the principles of the American experiment, American democracy, lowercase d democracy, the principles of the American nation state are above the petty little matters of faction and party politics and those kinds of things. He does seek to deprogram the government of Federalist plans. Sort of. And this is the difference between campaigning and governing that we're going to see in many lessons. What he campaigns for, the government that governs best, governs least, is not necessarily the way he governed. And we'll see that play itself out many times as a point of linkage throughout our history. For instance, he wants to cut taxes. He wants to cut government spending. He's anti-bank. He's pro-farm. We've been through all that. But what's he do? The Alien Sedition Acts, they were set to expire, he lets them expire. So these massive violations of civil liberties, the states never have to nullify them because they go away. They go away on their own. Everyone's happy to see that. The nation cheers that. He specifically cancels the whiskey tax, says we're not going to do that whiskey tax anymore, which is good and useful for the farmers. They see them as being representative of a government serving their needs. But he keeps the Bank of the United States. He keeps the Bank of the United States, which he had argued in Washington's cabinet was an illegal and unconstitutional overreach of federal authority. Now, why did he do it? Among the other reasons, well, there's really one reason, the best reason of all, because it worked. History had proved Hamilton right in terms of what the bank and the economic generation of wealth and commerce that a bank as a financial clearinghouse could provide for the nation could do. We were ahead of schedule on paying off our debts. We were paying down our war bonds. We were paying the bonds that were owed to Americans. We were paying down debts to foreign nations. And the nation was gradually seeing an economy that was growing. And Jefferson had the judgment to understand that he could not simply govern as an ideologue and throw out everything that he said his own people didn't agree with. There were things that worked and had merit.